Hello. Welcome to episode 18 of the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum. If you're playing this back at a later time, welcome. If you're with us live on Zoom or YouTube, we'll take your questions and comments on our Discord. There's a category named Live Show with channels under it named Live Questions and Live Chat. We don't use Zoom's chat or Q&A feature except right now. Here's a link to join the Discord if you're not already signed up. And if you want to invite other people to the show, you can find the Zoom and Discord registration information on our Facebook page. If you're with us live on Zoom, you can stick around after we're done and participate in our post-show, where we'll have casual conversation and Q&As with open microphones. And this is a growing international and multi-faith, multicultural community that is all of you, of course, representing congregations of all sizes and all faiths. And at the technical level, denomination is transparent. We all want to communicate with our communities and to do it as effectively as we can. And that's why we're here, to help each other up our game. And we're but one of a related set of communities. Leo on our panel here, for instance, hosts a show on Sunday afternoons at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It is technical like ours and philosophical in a technical sense, with a particular focus on Jewish worship. What do you have planned for this week, Leo?
Well, I was going to actually say about what we did last week. Last week we covered two really key things. We actually demonstrated the same demonstration we did here on the venue, the synagogue that was completely circular, and we went a bit further into that. And also we covered mixed minus and how to set that up and the complexities of the audio side as we move to hybrid or multi delivery. That's going to be key to us.
Great. Cool. Yeah, that was a very interesting conversation and a really interesting sanctuary that we took a look at and analyzed pretty much to death, but it was well worth the conversation. And there are some other shows that we, Leo and I and some of our other panelists participate on. There's office hours and AV tech talks and others. So those are all listed in the Discord under a channel called Related Shows. You can look them up. They're well worth taking a look at. And there's more. We have training opportunities. Mark Plukas here on the panel has been conducting an audio mixing and sound training every Monday at 3 in the afternoon Eastern Time. And Mark, what do you have on the agenda for this week?
This week, we're going to take a look at signal types and connector types. So we'll talk about XLRs and quarter phones and tip ring sleeve and balanced versus unbalanced and microphone line, speaker level. We'll talk about the whole interconnection world.
Excellent. Just a note, Leo, I've given you the host. I see Jay Paul is currently a guest, and maybe some of our other regulars are joining us late. So if you could let them in as co-hosts, that'd be great. Okay, and there's Joanna, who is usually on our panel, is offering Audacity training. So look in the Discord for information on that. And it's these interactive, engaging opportunities on Discord during our post-show and our training classes that really is what makes this all work. It's all of us who do AV tech for our communities and our congregations, all working together to learn from each other and to hear each other's stories and help us all up our game, which I think is an incredible thing that pre-COVID just didn't exist before, right? So head on over and engage with others on the Discord and share in the wealth. So I want to thank our panelists for coming today. We have Mark Plukas in Massachusetts and Jay Paul in Maryland, Joanna Lovell, if she's here, she's in Pennsylvania. We typically have Leo Mindell here is in London. We also typically have Christal Vakes and Rob McKinnon in Florida. And sometimes we have some other guests who are coming in and coming and going. So you never know who's going to be on the panel each week, but everybody here is a major contributor to the show. And I know that there are other people out there who are just as knowledgeable and dedicated to working on or volunteering with their congregation's technology needs. And so if you'd like to contribute to the panel discussion, then all you have to do is get here an hour early on Thursdays between 6 and 6:30 generally. We let people in to do check-in and sound check. And then everybody else can welcome to come in and take a listen. Now, during the show, attendee microphones are muted until the post-show, and questions and Q&As and comments are all done in the Discord, so head over there. So later today, we're going to be talking about OBS. We're going to be doing a tutorial. We'll look at the interface. We'll look at how to set up scenes and sources and transitions and such. And that'll be really interesting. We have a few people on the panel here who are knowledgeable about that. But first, we're going to take a look at a needs assessment that was the second of our contest winners. We started this a few weeks ago. We had another conversation with them offline because we just needed to iron out some other information and make some other recommendations. And so we did that. And we're going to take a look at, we're going to take a review of that now. So this was a congregation in Gwinnett, Georgia. It's the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Gwinnett. And let's see. Let's take a look and is it this one? Nope. Where is it? Let me get over to my Stream Deck, OBS, and it is, oh, it is Firefox. There we go. All right. Good. So what we did, so to fill everybody in, when we first started here about, 18 episodes ago, 18 weeks ago, we ran a contest for 3 congregations. We're going to be selected as winners in 3 different size categories, where we would, where the panelists would do a needs assessment based on information that the church has provided, the congregations provided to us, so that we can make recommendations and provide guidance about equipment needs and staffing needs and workflow needs for their transition to hybrid worship. And so this was the second one. This is the 100 to 200 seat category. The first one was under 100 seats. The third one will be over 200 seats. So we go through a list of technological priorities that we've established, and that's on the Discord to see. And these are in order of priority. Certain things have to be established and working before other things can rely on them. And like the first one is your internet and your LAN, your internet architecture, your network architecture has to be solid, has to have enough bandwidth, has to have reserved bandwidth that can't be interfered with before you can do web streaming. If you don't have that, your stream will not be reliable. So that is the very top of our list in terms of technical priorities. And this particular building in Georgia is limited to DSL service, which is unfortunate. They currently test at 50 megabytes down and only 10 megabytes upload speed. And we know that speed tests are not the same as streaming. Speed tests are based on a file transfer, and file transfers can be interrupted in mid-course. And so it's taking an average over a certain period of time, and that's what it's reporting as. Actually, it's reporting average, and it's also reporting peak transfer time. So when it comes to streaming, which requires a sustained level of transfer, data transfer speed, we always discount what speed tests are telling us. And for a 720p stream, you want to have 10 megabytes of upload bandwidth available. And that's dedicated to the stream, and if there's any other internet traffic going on, like, cell phones looking at web pages or email or anything else, that's over and above the needs of the 10 megabits reserved for web streaming. So what we did was we advised them to look into other services, and if nothing else is available, there's the option of getting a second DSL line and combining them in the router to double their upload speed. And then the network infrastructure that's inside the building is also important, because that has to provide for priority traffic control and class of service that prioritizes the streaming traffic over any other traffic that's happening in the building. And the second in our list of priorities is audio, because you can have mediocre video and all the information that you really need to provide to your viewers is contained in the audio. And people will hang around if you have great audio and mediocre video. But if you have mediocre audio and great video, you're going to lose your audience. We know that from years and years and years of study on the subject. And that goes for television, movies, audio without video is called radio, but video without audio is called technical difficulties, or silent movies. And so that doesn't work for a service. So we provided quite a bit of guidance on audio. We look at wireless microphones and whether the frequencies they have are still legal, and whether they're providing reliable audio and good audio quality. We look at the wired microphones they have and make sure that they have enough of them to cover all of their needs, to be able to mic every sound source, instrument, voice, choir, the congregation, everything. And, we want to take an inventory of that. So we did that. And if there are music performances that involve guitars or basses or other instruments that might have pickups in them, you want to have what we call a DI box, a direct injection box. It's an interface between the instrument and the microphone inputs on the console. So we want to have those available. And then we look at the mixer itself. We want to make sure that the mixer has enough inputs for all of the sources, both microphones, video, audio that's coming from video playback, audio from Zoom if you're going to be doing interactive engagements, audio from slides, PowerPoints, all of those things. So we kind of provide a sample listing of what the inputs would typically be for a sanctuary like this, as well as the number of outputs that the mixer would need. And we kind of do a sample listing here, which includes floor monitors for the musicians, for the people on stage, a second mix output for the stream, and recording outputs. We want to record audio when we can. So that's all listed here. And so when we're looking at selecting a mixer that fits the needs of this congregation, we look at all of the inputs that are going to be needed. We look at all of the outputs that are going to be needed, and we add a margin to allow for growth down the road. And so we did that, and we're recommending for this particular congregation something like the X32 Compact, which is a fairly small format physical mixer, sits on a desk, that is capable of up to 32 inputs and 16 outputs. They will need a minimum of 12 inputs by our count so far. the next size down mixer will be too small, right? Won't allow for them, won't allow any growth potential for them, and not really saving a whole lot of money anyway. And so that's the kind of mixer that we're recommending. And then in addition to the mixer, we need to be able to transport audio signals from microphones on the stage to the mixer. And so there's the choice of an analog snake or digital snake that is integrated with the mixer. And so that's a recommendation as well. Now, from the mixer, we go to the loudspeakers in the room. And this was a particular challenge for a number of reasons. The room shape, particularly the ceiling shape in this room, is a little bit out of the ordinary. It's it looks like a there's a peak in the center, and then it goes flat out to the walls. And this is and it's they're dropped ceiling tiles. And currently in the ceiling tiles, there are some grills for loudspeakers in the room, in the ceiling. There are 4 of them, and they didn't know what they were. And so we had them go up into the ceiling and take a look. And they were fairly small, 7-inch or 7.5-inch full range speaker drivers that were just screwed to a panel that helped it be supported by the ceiling grid. And while they didn't have any particular complaints about how the sound was that they'd be getting in the room, we felt that they really deserved to have proper speaker system. But we haven't made any particular recommendations because the acoustics in the room, the shape of the ceiling, the way that the chairs and seats are laid out in a circular pattern made a selection rather challenging, and would be something that I would prefer that somebody who really understands how to select a speaker and how speakers work be in the room physically to provide additional information. So we didn't make any recommendations on specific loudspeakers for this room, but we did recommend that they seriously consider doing an upgrade. And the power amplifier to drive those speakers, whatever they may be, currently they're using a hi-fi receiver to drive those speakers. And, you know, that's probably fine for the speakers they have, is acceptable. However, everything that they have is rather old. Those speakers have been in the ceiling for 30 years, and we don't know the age of the receiver. So when the speakers are upgraded, we recommend they upgrade the power amplifier accordingly, and that it be specified according to the needs of the speaker that's chosen. Monitor speakers for the choir and the musicians is often helpful because when people are spread out, or when there are performers behind other performers, it often becomes difficult to hear what's being done in front of you unless you have some loudspeaker to listen to. So we discussed that, and we have some options there. And let's see, from here on, we go to speaker processing, which speaker processing is a method of calibrating the speakers to the room so that they have a flat response, and so that all of the seats in the room hear the same audio quality at the same audio level. So that's something that is always recommended, and sometimes that can be handled by the mixing console, and sometimes that needs to be an external device. Headphones are always recommended. There's a headphones for the mixer who's doing the room, and a second set of headphones for the mixer who's doing the stream, because they need to hear what they're doing. Hearing assistance system is always advisable in a house of worship. because you want to be inclusive to people who have hearing issues. And we went over the 4 different types of hearing assistance systems available. We did that on a prior show, so I don't need to do it again. That is also in it. Behind this document, there's another document that is several charts that have listings of all of this equipment and samples that, good brands, good particular models that we recommend. It's not an exclusive list by any means. It's not an exhaustive list either, but it's a good one. And so it gives you, we'll give them a good place to start from. All right, and lighting in this room seemed to be sufficient for cameras at least, and for people in the room. So we had no recommendations. And that brings us to video and with cameras. So they have 2 small cameras now. They're handy cams, like consumer level handy cams, and they've been using that for their virtual service. And that can be sufficient to get them started, provided that they can mount them. You don't want to handhold them. You don't want to have them necessarily on tripods because they tend to move, they tend to get kicked, they can be obstacles. The wiring is always being moved around, which makes them vulnerable. So we do recommend that cameras used for worship every Sunday be permanently mounted to a ceiling or a wall. And you can get started with those, but of course, we're recommending that, for long-term use, you really want to have better cameras. And there's a number of different ways to go. We recommend a minimum of 2 cameras. One of them can be a fixed camera that's either got a wide shot or a medium shot of the pulpit area. And the other one can be a motorized camera, pan, tilt, zoom, that can cover any other part of the room that needs to be covered. And the idea is that you have 2 cameras because when you move the pan, tilt, zoom camera, before you move it, you can cut away to the fixed camera, do your move, and then switch back to that camera so that you're not showing the move on the air, because those moves can be unattractive, can be a fast whip, which, please, my eyes hurt. So having 2 cameras to choose from gives you way more options and a much better look on the air. Then you can also grow to more than 2 cameras, which gives you even more options. And the ability to cover different parts of the chancel from different angles just looks really good on camera when you, at home, when you see different perspectives of the room. All right. Now, cameras naturally need to be connected to a camera switcher that's at the tech desk. And there are a number of different methods of wiring, protocols for wiring that are used. Depends on the camera, it depends on the switcher. And so we list the 3 major types of camera connections that are typically used: HDMI, SDI, and NDI. And we go through the differences here a little bit in explanation. HDMI has some distance limitations. In order to go more than 30 feet, you need to get some more and more expensive cable. And the more expensive cable tends to be more fragile. SDI is a coax-based solution. It's very robust. It can go 300 feet, but it's basically, but it has some limitations. And when you're using pan, tilt, zoom cameras, you have 3 different kinds of signals. You have the video signal, you have the signals for the motors, and you have power for the rig. And so sometimes you may need to provide 3 different sets of wire to every camera. And that could go for HDMI, it could go for SDI. NDI is a network protocol. So the camera gets connected to an Ethernet cable. It goes to an Ethernet switch that gets connected typically to a computer. And then all of your NDI sources, whether they can be cameras, they can be other computers, sources from all of those devices can feed into your computer that's doing video switching and streaming. And that's a one wire solution to all of your cameras. Very, very interesting technology, well worth looking into, well worth considering. NDI can also do distribution to your projector and other screens in the facility. Carries video and it carries audio, and it just received a major upgrade that is on the brink of being released. They announced it. They talked about it. There was a rollout. It's been in beta testing. It's got some fantastic new features coming out, including the ability to connect with cameras and other sources over the internet. So that's going to be extremely cool. When you're dealing with, when you're working with pan-tilt zoom cameras, you need to be able to control the motors to tell the camera which way to move, left, right, up and down, zoom in, zoom out, iris, focus, all of that is done by a camera controller. There are hardware controllers. They look kind of like a keyboard with a joystick on it. There are software controllers that can be done on a screen. OBS and vMix, the software video switchers that we'll be talking about later today, they can include controls for pan-tilt zooms. And so that makes it very convenient, and you have a number of different choices. It is often easier and more convenient to program those devices because you can set presets, and presets is like pulpit, piano, choir. Those are all presets. You push a button and the camera goes to those locations automatically and very quickly. It's often easier to program those on a hardware device than it is in software, but you do have that option. And you can manually move the cameras using the joystick on the hardware controller is often more accurate and easier than trying to do it with a mouse. In video switching, so we have hardware switchers and software switchers. Software switcher such as OBS that we'll be talking about, a hardware switcher such as the very popular Blackmagic Designs Atem Mini Pro or Atem Extreme if you need more than 4 inputs. And the choice between those is philosophical, sometimes religious, some are very hardcore hardware switchers. Some people prefer software switchers. Sometimes it's very helpful to have both, with a hardware switcher first, followed that feeds into a software switcher that is also your Zoom encoder. And so they have already procured an Atem Mini Pro, and we'll be using that. And we will be talking about whether or not they're going to use a software switcher after that downstream. Projection, they have a small projector and a pop-up screen that they would set up. We recommended a better projector that gets mounted on the ceiling permanently. That way all of the wires that go to it are permanently installed and don't move around. That makes them much more reliable. A projector with a laser lamp in it will last 20,000 hours, probably last the life of the church. And then a motorized screen that gets mounted on the wall that gets lowered down when it's needed and then rises up when it's not. They're quiet, they're unobtrusive. And when you get a screen with a surface that is dark gray, it makes it more or less obtrusive than a white screen on a wall. And video distribution to other areas in the facility, such as overflow rooms, fellowship hall, and such. We talked about that. That could be done over NDI. And control systems. So how do we make all this easier to operate? We'll be looking at a lot of different controls that can happen in OBS. There are a lot of different things that can happen on an Atem video switcher. There's moving the cameras around. There's selecting sources. There's even operating the audio mixer. Can be made easier to operate through the aid of a control system, control and automation system, such as a Stream Deck has become very popular, that can be programmed, any one of its up to 99 buttons in layers can be programmed to do certain operations in software and hardware. And so that makes it, having those buttons makes it very easy to do. And each of those buttons can have a software changeable label on it so that they can actually change function depending on what you're doing. We've talked about Stream Decks a lot on this show. And then training. We're talking about a fairly sophisticated, what in effect is a television broadcast operation. And that's not something that is, you can learn in one training session. And so training is kind of an ongoing thing, or should be, because you can learn the very basics up front, and then you can kind of learn on your own. But it's very helpful to have a training program over time, so that everybody can learn at their own pace, to advance their knowledge, advance their understanding of the equipment that they're using for the benefit of the church, for the benefit of the church's online presence. That training program can be online. There are plenty of resources online to learn all of this stuff. I mean, especially in the COVID, year and a half, so many training videos have gone online. It's a wealth of information. Sometimes personal in-person training or personalized online training through Zoom can be very helpful as well. And computers. So computers play a big part in this operation. There's the streaming computer. There are confidence computers to monitor the stream, make sure it's working. So if you're going out to, for example, Zoom and YouTube, you want to be able to watch those two platforms to make sure that you're getting out, your audio and video is getting out, and to make sure that there aren't any sync issues or anything else. There's a computer to handle graphics and video playback and audio playback, anything that you might want to add in for flavor. Sometimes you'll want to show things in the sanctuary on your large screen display. Sometimes you want to show things to the people at home as well, hymn lyrics and such. Then there's also, in some cases, maybe for larger congregations than this one, we provide a monitor at the back of the room so that the speakers at the chancel don't have to read their notes off of paper down at the lectern. They can actually look up and see all their notes and their scripts and keep their head up and look at the congregation as well. There are other computers that could be involved. There's an audio computer to help control that and to do audio recording if you so select. There's could be a second computer for playback. There's the chat monitor, which should be another computer. So there are a number of things involved. And some of these, a couple of these computers really need to be pretty hefty computers with lots of processing power, graphics power, and memory to handle all that video, the input sourcing, the encoding, the streaming. But many of the others can be much smaller, lower powered computers for playback and chat monitoring and confidence monitoring of the streams. Those can be done by Raspberry Pis for $100, or even an old tablet, smaller Windows or Mac laptop or desktop. Lots of different things are available at very reasonable prices. Computer monitors, however, should be plentiful, because having two monitors on a computer is really handy, because we got a lot of windows open here, trying to keep track of a lot of different things. And so you want to have the desk space for all of this too. And so the control desk is also an important part. You want to make sure that you have enough space for all the equipment and the people to operate it. And that reaches the end. Now, in the meantime, Russ went and provided, he and Jay Paul worked up a diagram of what this might look like. And here's a copy of that. And we discussed this. I reviewed this and I thought this was really good. There were a few comments that I made. Let's take a look at this. So at the heart of this, we have the Atem Switcher right here, which is taking in 3 cameras and is also taking in video from a laptop that's down here for playback. And they were going through an HDMI switcher so that they can send it to the projector up this way. And they can also send it to the Atem. And I have some thoughts about that we discussed, and they may rethink that. So then from the Atem, they're going out to a video monitor so they can see what they're doing. They're also going out to the Zoom PC, which is their streaming PC. And this PC can also, this one right here, can also have a software switcher in it like OBS or vMix or any of the others. And that gives them additional options to bring in video sources from other computers and other devices, where the Atem Mini is limited to 4 physical inputs, and then it has the capability of holding some still frame videos, some slides and such. Sometimes that can be kind of limiting. And so having a software switcher in here allows them to bring in additional sources using something like NDI, for example, can bring in this playback device. It could bring in any number of playback devices, can bring in other sources as well. So they may consider doing that. And that would kind of eliminate this splitter and this switch as well, because the projector would be handled by this computer right here. And that kind of simplifies things because you don't have to worry about what position this switch is in, right? The Zoom PC goes out to the internet because that's your streamer. And they were bringing Zoom back into another computer right here for confidence monitoring, as we discussed. And they were going to take the output of this and go to the projector. That had some thoughts about that, and which we just discussed. And that will be, so when you do this, you know, this seems like a good idea, but this Zoom client is a third person, and will carry audio from both directions. So it'll be carrying the audio that they're sending out, plus the audio that's coming back, and that's not something that they want to do. So to bring in a participant from home who's on Zoom, they would come into the Zoom PC and then they would go out to the projector from there. That brings us to, oh, and there's a Stream Deck here that's connected to this computer, so it can have control over any software switcher here. It could have control over Zoom functions. It can also have control over the Atem functions. So that's pretty handy. That brings us to audio. The audio mixer is down here. There are a number of inputs to it. So there's wireless receivers, there are wired microphones, and there's audio input from the playback computer. All great. And then there are outputs to go to the Sanctuary loudspeakers, to go to overflow room, an assisted listening system. And that's all good. and also to the Zoom PC. So they're doing a separate mix for the speakers, for the overflow room, for assisted listening. Those could be actually the same mix, and a separate mix for the Zoom PC, which we've talked about and is absolutely appropriate. And so this is a pretty good start on a system diagram. Congratulations. Russ, if you have anything that you'd like to contribute or discuss, feel free.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate all the work that has gone into this. It's the whole experience of the forum has been quite wonderful, and I've found that by rewatching recordings that I keep getting more out of it because I have a point of reference, for all these things. So I just want to tell you all, I appreciate all the time that you put into this because it is a complex monster, and so as you keep increasing your knowledge of it, it kind of gives you a context in which to put everything. So I think I understand most of what you've recommended, and that's only because y'all have been careful to explain everything as we've gone along and entertain all the crazy questions for me, along the way. So I don't have anything particular extra, to add at this point.
I had a quick question for you, Ross. How much? I know you're on the journey to it. How much of this have you already put in place, and have you got a target date of when you're going to have your first service in the sanctuary?
Yeah, the second part is easier to address. We're actually moving our simple streaming that we've been doing from our home. We're actually moving that back to the sanctuary building this Sunday. In terms of actually creating the hybrid service, that will be, based on the reconvening team that has been analyzing all these things. August 15th will be our first service, our first actual hybrid service. So that's how that looks. In terms of the equipment and so on, as Marty mentioned, we have the Atem Mini Pro. I have a Stream Deck, which now I have to figure out how to program. One of the next things will be deciding on the mixer, the audio mixer that is, and what computers we need to acquire in order to move this forward. We will probably begin again with the projector that we have already because it's just too much to take on in that short of time frame. But and some of this will be aspirational, but I think it's it's all good. Did that answer your question?
It does. Just a word of slight warning. The Behringer, well, in fact, every mixer range at the moment is going through really short supply. So don't leave it too long. You may find that there is a real shortage, or there is a real shortage. So trying to shop around for the cheapest price may be a little bit difficult at the moment. Have a look. Just be aware.
Thank you for that.
Marty, we've got a couple of questions in the box. So we're not good, J-Lo. I'll read them out to you. The first one is Keith Miller from Paint Branch MD. Is this document available?
Yes, I will post it in the Discord. I'll also post our equipment recommendations document in the Discord.
Great. The second question from John Lecker in Silver Spring. Your choice of PTZ cameras with 20 times zoom. What are the dimensions of their sanctuary main hall?
Russ?
I can't actually recall them all off the top of my head. It's almost 50 feet from the front of the sanctuary to the rear wall. Width-wise, I think it was almost that much, so probably 45 feet. And then, as you mentioned, it had kind of a peak that ran from front to back, and then kind of broke down into about probably 6-8 feet of horizontal sections.
There are a number of online calculators for you to work out the size of the camera and which one. So I know that PTZ Optics have one, but whoever the manufacturer is, most of them will give you an idea of what you want to achieve to be able to get effectively a head and shoulder shot from the back of wherever you mount the camera to wherever you're trying to aim at.
That's right. Yeah. The zoom ratio that you need to cover a specific size room may not be the same from camera manufacturer to camera manufacturer, even camera model to camera model, because it's dependent on the sensor size in the camera and the several other variables that go into it. And so that's why each of the camera manufacturers offer a calculator. And essentially what you want to do is you want to figure out what the angle of the widest view you want is and the angle of the narrowest view. So when you're fully zoomed in, how wide do you want that view to be? Do you want it to be 3 foot, 6 foot, etc.? Once you know those limits, you can plug those into the calculator and it will tell you what zoom ratio you should be looking at, which is essentially what lens is on the camera. And yeah, Leo makes an excellent point that there's an extreme electronics shortage worldwide going on because of microchips factories that have gone offline or burned down or had contamination.
When they finally got some of it onto a ship, I think the ship sunk.
And the ship sank, right?
Yeah.
And so everything from cars to refrigerators to cameras to audio mixers to converters, everything is in short supply right now. That could have a significant impact on the timeline to get all of our projects completed because we won't have the equipment to install.
So we suffered exactly the same happened last year, and we ended up with finding that the equipment that we were trying to get, we just couldn't get it in the time frames that we wanted, and we had to order and ended up paying slightly higher prices. Then all the prices dropped at the end of the year, but unfortunately, it's starting again, or has, as you said. And it's just across the board now on everything.
And I haven't heard any estimates about, when the shortage might get eased. We're waiting for some kind of information about factories restarting or supply chains being fulfilled.
The other alternative for some of this equipment, particularly if you went down the route of things like the Behringer, you can buy these secondhand. They're pretty good workhorses and they've been around for a long time, and you can buy them and they'll continue going.
Yeah, a lot of sanctuaries are upgrading theirs right now who had X32s, and so I've seen a few on the market. All right, I need a drink. Hang on a second.
Okay, that's it. We're out of questions at the moment. If you do have questions, please put them into Discord. Thank you, and thank you for the team that we went through. As you said, we covered a lot of stuff with the guys there, with Russ and the team there. And I don't know who else is on the panel today, or who else is here from your team, Russ.
Just one other person, Christiana McQueen, is on that I happen to see.
Okay, great. Did she have any comments? I'll just ask her if she has. I'm not sure. Her camera's off at the moment. I didn't know if she had anything to add.
I'm here. I don't have anything to add. I would echo Russ's thanks to all of you for the time and attention that you've put into this. We appreciate that immensely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And this brings to mind, this whole exercise brings to mind the importance of keeping everything in perspective. Like, I find it totally remarkable that at the beginning of COVID, all of these congregations, all these houses of worship who never had any experience in television production, web streaming, none of this, everybody figured out how to do it, and in fairly short order. And, you know, I attribute that to a couple of things. I attribute that to the amazing technology that was available at the time, which is so far ahead of technology that was available even a year before that, right? It would have been so much more difficult. I also attribute that to some amazing people who were so dedicated to figuring this out for their churches, for their houses of worship, that they just did. They put in the time. They did. They consulted with people, and people were available to consult with. You know, so we weren't online at that time, but we were around. I consulted, and we all consulted with a number of congregations, and so this combination was just amazing. And so now there's a second transformation, because hybrid worship, as we're seeing, is very different than virtual services were. It's more complex. There are more moving parts. There are more people involved, and we'll all get through it. You will get through it. I promise you. You know, take it one step at a time. You don't have to do it all at once. Economically speaking, acquiring the equipment and having it installed all at once does make a lot of sense economically, because the labor is expensive. You don't have to use it all at once, but you can also start small with a smaller investment and then add stuff later. We do recommend that all of the wiring that you anticipate needing go in at once, because that labor is really expensive. And so you can ease into it, you can phase into it, as Russ was saying, and that's, you know, perfectly valid, perfectly okay to do that, and it'll work. It'll work. So congratulations, everybody. You know, I know you're going to do great. From my discussions with all of you, you certainly have it on the ball, so I'm sure you'll do well. And, you know, if there's anything that you need, we'll be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So let's move on to another topic. So a lot of people have asked us about OBS. OBS is a free software switcher that a lot of people started using at the beginning of COVID, and figured it out. It's, you know, it's a free download. It's a very comprehensive product that can do lots of really nice things. It's a live on-air switcher, can also be used for recording, for pre-recording. It's a streaming engine that can go out to YouTube and Twitch and a bunch of other places right out of itself. It is NDI compatible, both input and output. You can get different add-on plugins for it. It's a pretty incredible thing. And there are other software switchers such as vMix and Ecamm and others that can be used. But today we're going to talk mostly about OBS. And if we have time, we'll take a look at some others for comparison. So let's take a look at the interface for OBS. So this is the main control section of OBS down here. And I've kind of cut off the top where the screen on the left is a preview monitor. The screen on the right is the program monitor, which is what is going out on the air. And you're looking at me through OBS right now. And and so the way this works, and hardware switches work as well, you can have one source on the air and then have another source brought up into the preview monitor. people at home don't see it. That is just for the people in the studio. And that's to set up the next source that is going to go on the air. So it's a two-step process. The next source that's going on the air comes up in the preview monitor. You can make adjustments to it before it goes on the air. Then you hit the take button, and then it goes and switches to the program monitor. And that goes on the air. In OBS, we have the option of showing that like I have here. And you're only seeing the bottom here because if I show you the top, it'll just go into video feedback and look like the House of Mirrors. We can also go into what we call studio mode, which has just one. Where did it go? Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong, did I hit the wrong one? There it goes. Studio mode, which has just one monitor. This is the on-air monitor. And I think we're going to stay with this right now because it's just easier to manipulate. So you're seeing here, there it is. Okay, I'm just looking at the YouTube, which just popped up. So you're seeing this, and what you see on the left, this is a list of scenes that I've created. And then with each of these scenes, the one scene that I have selected here is a number of sources. And some of these sources are grayed out, so we're not seeing them. But what we are seeing is the display capture, which is what is showing OBS. We're showing my camera here down in the corner. And we're showing this blue background with the white specks on it. And now you notice that the blue background is behind the other two sources. And that is because it is the last here in the list. If I were to bring it up, I could move it up to the front and it'll be in front of everything else. Now, if I were to make my video larger, OBS is in front of me because that's the order that it is in this list. So the display capture is first, that is OBS. My camera is second, so I'm behind OBS. And the background is last, and that's behind me and OBS. So we'll take a look at how to do this, how to create this in just a moment. And that is all within this one scene that I've called, and let me move things around here a little bit. It's called App Window. It's not moving. Should be able to move this. There it goes.
Can I remind people too, if they've got any questions, to put their questions in Discord, and we'll take the questions as they come through in Discord.
Yes. All right, so now I can change from scene to scene. I can go to another camera. I can go to my Acrobat. I can go to a clock, to the logo, and back to here. So those are all scenes that I selected here. And within each of those scenes is a similar list of sources, and the sources are the inputs. The scenes are the combinations of inputs that we can set up to show. So let's do this. I'm going to create a new scene, and I'm going to label it no, not that, because I've already used that. We're going to name it test scene. And now you can see it's right here. And you know what? I can't show you how I build that. Yes, I can. I will do this. Give me just a moment. Let me bring in the display capture. video feedback. All right, give me a moment to work on that. So here what I'm doing is I'm zeroing in on a certain portion of my screen, and now I can blow it up. And so to do that, to change the size, I'm simply grabbing a handle and moving it with the mouse. But to zero in on a portion of the screen, I'm holding the Alt button down while I'm using the mouse, and you can see that it's changing where on the screen I'm focusing in on. And then I can place it and resize it. Okay. So now you're still seeing that, you should be seeing that entire screen. All right. And now what I can do is I can go and under my sources column, I can hit the plus button, add another source, and I will bring in a video capture device, and I will select the existing camera. And I'm going to resize this. And there we go. So I'm actually going to change that. I'm going to, so that's the camera itself. And let me show you the properties of this camera. Because there could be a number of cameras available, right? I could have more than one camera. So when you look at properties for a source, you have this window here that pops up, and you can select from a number of different options. This MEI CV502U3, that is my primary camera that I'm looking at right now. I can take video from NDI. I have vMix on this machine. I could take OBS's virtual camera. I have all these options available to me. And then I have some ways to manipulate that and control that. So when I bring in, and when I click on configure video, I get this little box, and I can change the brightness of the camera, of the video, the contrast ratio, or I should be able to. The hue, green, blue. The color saturation, I can go really tan or really pale, black and white. And let me come back to something resembling normal. The sharpness, which highlights details in an image, like sharp details. And let's see, what can we see that on? We can see that on that mixer right up there. You can see the detail change a little bit. The gamma, which is pretty much everything. Now, not all cameras allow this kind of adjustment. This one is going a little bit.
So there's a question related to this. There's a number of questions in the box, Marty, but on this one, Deborah is asking, are the properties Marty is adjusting on his main camera inherent to the camera and its drivers, or does OBS enable those kinds of adjustments?
Well, let's see. So that's a good question. And I'm pretty sure that with these particular controls, this being the video processing amplifier, this is happening in OBS. This is not happening at the camera. There's another tab here called camera control with something like zoom and exposure, which is not working.
It's on auto, Marty, on auto on the right.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Hey.
So which camera are you using this, Marty?
This is the Marshall mini camera, the CV503. That's on auto as well. So aperture is shutter speed. No, is iris. So that's not working either. That would be a camera lens function. If OBS was communicating with the camera and the camera had the ability to change the iris, that's what would happen here, but this camera doesn't. So we'll put that on automatic. Low light compensation and some other things. So this is all happening pretty much in OBS. White balance is another thing that is really important to do because it compensates for the color of the lights. And keeping it on auto generally works. Backlight compensation, if you had a bright window behind you, that would backlight you. So this backlight compensation would cut down on that and help your face be less shadowed. And the overall gain, so bring it way down, bring it way up. That's kind of similar to gamma. All right, so we have all these different capabilities in features. Now let's see, I'm going to get out of this for a minute. Now I have a scene here called Head On, which is my camera that I've already made some adjustments on. So let me take a look at those. And so I've made some configuration adjustments here, but I've also applied a filter. Now this is really interesting.
We're not seeing it, Marty. You flip to that.
Oh, that comes up in a different window. Oh, yeah. Let me see if I can get that. There it is. All right. So filter effects, there's an audio section and a video section. So let's talk about video. Once you have your image set, you can add a bunch of different effects to it. Now, let me, I'll give you an example. Let's look at this background that I have here. This blue background that's moving a little bit. That's a still image that is, hang on a second. Oh, that's a different one.
While you're doing that, Marty, we've got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Which I'll bring up the first one here. Deborah Mensch has asked, I've heard and experienced a little bit that OBS can be fairly crash prone. Do you have any advice or tricks to help deal with that and when using it for live events like multi-platform worship? So I'd say that I personally have had a few times when OBS has crashed. It is PC dependent upon the hardware, particularly about the video card. It does like the NVIDIA video cards and make sure that you support NVIDIA encode, NVIDIA decode on the card. If your chipset doesn't support it, you're going to put a lot of pressure onto it. You can see on the bottom right hand side when you've got OBS, it tells you how much pressure you're putting onto the computer. But being an open source software, they do bring out versions fairly regularly. Some of them are stellar and some of them aren't as robust. That would be my comment.
Yeah, there was just a recent update to OBS that came out like very recently.
Last 24 hours.
Yeah, so I just updated this yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, I've already found a bug in it. If you've got videos already set up, you'll suddenly find the audio doesn't play unless you reset the audio settings. That's that I found.
I actually don't
today.
use the audio in OBS. I take my audio to my software mixer and straight into Zoom. I'm just using OBS for video. So I haven't tried the audio, and if there are any bugs there, I'm not aware.
So there's another question, sort of semi-related to this, from Chris Clark. Do you generally recommend separate computers for running OBS and then Zoom, or do you generally run both on the same machine?
I run them on the same machine. They can be run on separate machines. You have to figure out how to get the audio and video between them. NDI is a good resource for that. I'm running everything, Zoom and OBS, and all of the things that I'm showing you, the documents that we showed, I'm all running them on this one machine, which is a Hewlett-Packard workstation machine. It's an older one. It's got Windows 10 on it. It's got an AMD video card on it, which NDI does not like. I can receive NDI signals on this machine, but I can't generate any of them.
So I would add one of the things to bear in mind is OBS's history. 18 months ago, OBS was designed to actually stream. It didn't have the concept of Zoom didn't exist in OBS's world. It was a streaming software, and typically when you go to set up OBS, the first thing it asks you is how to optimize it and optimize it for what you want to do. They added in the virtual camera support as a native part of it around Christmas, I think it was. Maybe it was slightly earlier, I can't remember. And up until then, it had never been, this concept of using another thing to stream isn't what it does. So it has changed in its need, and now most people are using it in a mode that it was never ever designed for.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, and it still doesn't, none of these devices, a hardware switcher, software switchers, none of them stream directly to Zoom. You have to take the video from them into your Zoom client, your Zoom application, and open it there, because Zoom is a two-way platform. Unlike YouTube or Facebook or any of the other platforms that are one-way platforms. OBS and the Atem, they can zoom out in a one-way, but they don't do two-way.
Yeah, so as well as adding virtual video, I believe now OBS has added a virtual audio setup. I haven't actually used it myself, but I've read that that's coming or due out, or it's out already. And yes, to Keith Miller, yes, I did ask a load of questions with my mic muted, which didn't go down very well. Thank you for spotting, Keith.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, the last one here is from Kitty Merrill. Could you show how to create a scene? So you've covered about sources. Mm-hmm. Can you, I think you sort of covered it, but.
Yeah, I can go over that again.
I think before you do, I think that there's a key thing here that I always find there's a couple of things, is why is there a scene and why is there sources? And this really confuses people. And the reason it can, and when I create something in a scene, when I create a source in a scene, how do I duplicate that to somewhere else? And I wonder if, Marty, if you can bring up into the relevant bit, take off your effects, and we can show it. There's two really critical elements in here. So why do you do it? Because you typically will have something like, you'll have a picture like Marty is here, with he's got a camera, him on the left, and then he's demonstrating something on the right, and on this side he's demonstrating the screen. But next time he'll do exactly the same, but he wants to demonstrate something else. So creating an identical scene is a good starting point. But when he creates the scene, when he then takes anything on the right hand side and a source, if you right click on a source and do a copy, then you now do a right click again, you should be able to, there's two pastes here, paste reference and paste duplicate. Paste duplicate literally does the copy and paste as you would expect, so it has no relevance to it. Paste referenced is a really useful thing. You want to put a bug or a logo of your logo in the top right hand corner. By doing paste reference, every single scene where you paste reference it will be using the same thing in the same physical location. So it saves you going through and going, oh, we now did that, and then we realized our logo needed to be just a couple of millimeters or in whatever is the right term, to the left or to the right. And it's like, oh yeah, it's easy. You can just do it. You do it in one place and you've got that. So that's a key component.
That's very helpful to have, yeah, because if you want something to appear identically in multiple scenes, that's a great way to do it. Now, just to make that distinction, a source is a single piece of video that's coming from someplace. So it's a camera, it's a file, it's an image, it's a PDF document, it's a window. It's just a piece of video. A scene is a collection of videos that all appear together. So this scene that I have right here, which contains the OBS window and my camera and this background, together, that's a scene. All right. Each one of these three things individually is a source.
And the other thing to state, and this catches a lot of people out, because first of all, everybody builds everything in the same sources, and then they find it's really easy on a Stream Deck to switch between the sources. But transitions only work between scenes. So if you want a really nice fade from one camera to another, you do it on a scene transition, not a source. So it's sort of, you'll see that
I'll get to transitions in a moment.
But it's a key part of it when you're building.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about the background that I have, and you see that it's moving a little bit. And I wanted to show how I created that because it's a good demonstration. And in order to do that, I have to go back to here. And you can't see this yet, so give me just a moment. Now I can get back to here, and now I can show this to you. Okay, so that background, that blue background with the speckles, that's coming from this still image that I have as a file in my computer. Now, the image seems to be moving a little bit, and it is, because I have a filter here called scroll that is actually doing a slow pan across this still image, and it just constantly repeats. When it gets to the right side of the image, the left side comes back in. So it's constantly scrolling the same image from left to right, or like a loop of paper, and you're only looking on the inside and the paper is spinning around, right? So that's what this is doing. And I'm only looking at a very small part of this image in my scene. So I have other backgrounds that I've created that are looking at different parts of this, but the one that you're looking at that's been behind these slides, the scene that you're looking at right now, is only looking at this small part of it way down here. And so you have the ability to do that if there's something in a scene that you like. Now, what's making it move are these controls right here. You see that I have a horizontal speed set at 10. I'm not sure what the increment is, but it's a very, very slow movement, just to give the background a little bit of movement so that it's not static. I could do a vertical pan, I could do a horizontal pan. I have lots of control. And right here, I have this checked off is called loop. So that's what's creating that loop of the image constantly.
And to use this in another format, I use exactly the same controls when you're running text across the bottom as a lower third. So if you write a piece of text and you do it, then it will appear something along the lines of join us for XYZ for something else. You can roll that across after the service, you roll that across the bottom using this.
See this thing that's coming right here? See this? That's right here. I don't know if you can see this. So that point right there above my head. We can
only see the first two.
You don't see my picture? My camera?
Yeah, we see your picture.
So there's a little point that just went by over my head.
Okay.
And that is,
yeah.
And that is this little edge that's right here, because I'm looking at the bottom of the screen here. So okay, so let me close this. Oh, I'm also color correcting this a little bit because I wanted to make this area darker. I wanted to make it midnight blue. So I'm doing a little bit of color correction here. And if I could just turn it, maybe I can just turn it off. That's what it looks like, the true picture looked like. And I wanted it darker for use in my background. So I put a color correction filter. Now, I can show this to you. I will bring up my camera and hit this filters button right here. And I have can hit filter effects, the plus here, and I can select from any of these filters. And feel free to do this and play with them, because that's the best way to learn what each one of them does. Here's scroll, here's scaling and aspect ratio. There's a delay. There's a couple of different kinds of keying effects. Cropping, color keying, color correction, which I just showed, a bunch of different things. So what I have is color correction here, and we kind of looked at that. This is similar to the controls that we looked at when adjusting the camera itself as a source that OBS provides, those controls. But these are done as a filter. So it's another layer of control that can be applied. And so that's, I adjusted this so that the flesh tones that I'm seeing look more natural when I did it this way than when I did it in the other set of controls that I had in OBS.
So there's a couple of other things that come in. Comment from Deborah. Leo's timeline about the virtual camera release is highly relevant for me. I was using OBS virtual cam to show lyrics for our Christmas Eve services, and I set up 4 virtual cameras because rehearsals showed at least one and was sure to crash. Sounds like it might be doing better now. Yeah, I think it's the thing with OBS. They introduce new features and they basically test them on us, and some of them work incredibly well and some of them don't. Question in from Cheryl Hamblin from Peterborough, Ontario in Canada. Can you provide links to Discord for good reference material, videos, for instance, on how to use OBS? My answer to that, there is an absolute wealth and ton of videos on YouTube on OBS. It's one of the most common things that are discussed in this environment, and there's some really, really good people out there. And it is one of those things where literally you put in a question into Google or into YouTube about what you want to do, and you can literally find an answer for it straight away.
And just to add to that, Crystal, who is normally here with us on our panel, she posted a really good video, tutorial video about OBS in one of our channels here. Maybe it was under technical. Let's see. I'll try and find it here. Streaming sound, videos.
While you're doing that,
software.
if people, it would be really interesting to know those on who are watching. Can you just put into the chat if you're using OBS or if you're using something else, so we just can get a feel for how many people are using that. So post that into the show chat channel.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. It is somewhere on the Discord where she posted a really good video as a OBS tutorial. So you can look for that there. I can't find it at the moment and don't want to waste your time while I look for it. So, okay. So, and I know there's some things in the chat channel. Something from Deborah, very cool. Camera on my laptop has hardly any useful adjustments. It looks like running through it. An OBS virtual camera could improve the results a lot with some manual tweaking. Absolutely possible. And Leo's timeline about the virtual camera release is highly relevant for me.
We've covered it. We've done those.
Okay,
We've done them all.
great.
We've done them all.
Great. Okay, cool. All righty then. So let's look at transitions. So in this mode, which is non-studio mode, we have a section here on the right called Scene Transitions. And there's a drop-down box here that gives us a choice of stuff from cut to fade to stinger, Luma wipe, slide, another Luma wipe, and we can add some more. So let's take a look at, we're at cut right now. So if I go here to here, that's a cut, right? It's instantaneous. But if I go fade, all right, there's a 300 millisecond fade. I can increase that to say 500 milliseconds. I can make it longer and make it 1,000 milliseconds.
And I would say that I find for houses of worship that the 750 to 1,000 milliseconds on a fade is quite, I see it quite often, and I think it looks effective in that environment when the cuts are something that you use much more in a news environment.
Right. Let's look at what a slide looks like.
And I'm going to add that if it isn't a cut or a fade, I don't want to see it.
Well, you can do, some really, so that's not quite a cut. It's a little different. It's called a stinger. Luma wipe is a triangular transition.
If any of you were here for the pre-show, Mark Pelucas was talking about Max Headroom and 1980s TV, and now Marty is showing you what it used to look like.
Right. So if we go into studio mode, things change a little bit. And okay, so here I'm going to show more of the top of the screen because that's where the relevancy is. And
you've gone into studio mode, Marty, so you're going to have to actually push it.
Yep. Okay.
No. We've just got a full version of you now. There you go.
There we go. And I'm going to go back to fade for transition.
So what I would say on studio mode is that studio mode is when you don't start in studio mode at the beginning because it's super confusing when you've got previews and shows at the beginning, because what you want to do is press a button and it does something. However, once you get into studio mode, once you get used to doing it, studio mode is where you say, I have what I'm looking at and I know where I'm going to next.
Right. And in terms of transitions, this gives you some additional options. Up here in between the two screens, between the program and the preview screen, there are quick transitions. So rather than, if you wanted to change, rather than going to this list down here, you can select from a couple different things. So I have a fade to black at 300 milliseconds. I have a fade at 500 milliseconds. And I have a slide, so I can just quickly choose any of these and do and create that. Now you'll see that when I select a scene, it shows up on the left screen here and not in the program. And that's so that I can look at something or a number of things and see which one I want to go to next. And then when I hit my transition up here, it'll go to that.
So typically in a multi-camera environment, what people will do is they will have their program and then they'll bring up into their preview what they're going to go to next. And then they'll transition to it. For information, and this is what ends up happening for a camera operator is that when they're in program mode, they will have red around them. So that means that they must not move. That tells them that they're live. It's called a tally light as well, or tally displays. For the preview, they're in a green box, so they know they're getting ready to go live. And every other camera is not lit. It's just how that works. And then Marty also has just at the bottom of underneath those controls, this one is a left to right, but it's called a T-bar, and Marty can slowly pull and transition by hand. So if you ever wanted to know how you do a really slow thing between, a wedding, as you can see, how you've got a bit of a picture of both the bride and the rest of the room, you use T-bar control. I'm sure you're familiar with seeing it.
Right. And if we were to select, what was that? Luma wipe. No, not the Luma wipe. Yeah, that was Luma wipe. Oh, that's right. Has to be selected here. I can stop in the middle.
So a good reason for using this, Marty will tell you, a good reason for using this, if you've got two pictures of your cameras and you focus them both on something and you use a Luma wipe and you pull it to half, then you've got half of the pictures and you can do a color balance really nicely across two, because then you can balance the two, because the cut line of the two parts of Marty, if you imagine with two cameras.
Yeah, exactly. So let's look at this. So I do have another camera that I can show you. Let me just set it up.
While you're setting that up, some of the comments from other people, that John Leckett is from Silver Spring, is learning OBS. I think we're all still learning OBS. I think it's one of those packages will all be there. Keith Miller from Paint Branch MD, I've never used any video controls hardware or software. It is a part that you'll get to. The nice thing about OBS is we've talked about it's open source, it's free, it's something you can try at home, it's something you can use all the time. Bill Newhouse has said not yet, he hasn't used anything yet. Tony Main is, yes indeed, I'm using OBS very rudimentarily in our services. Everybody starts that way, Tony. It's exactly how we all started, and we learned our video controllers. I mean, I've been using software controllers now for about 10 years. And I'd still say that at times it's like I'll sit here and watch something Marty's done and go, I didn't know I could do that. Deborah Menches says we're using OBS a little and haven't tried other software. Although their integrator is recommending a software package to go with our new camera switching setup. It'll be really interesting to know what they're recommending, Deborah, because there's a load out there. Matt is saying from our friends down in Mexico, OBS early on, but had crashes, switched to a hardware ATM Mini, planning to add vMix. We'll talk about vMix, I think, at the end of this, just to cover that. Kitty Merrill, we plan to move to OBS over the summer, just been using Zoom. I'd recommend using it with and start that thing as soon as you can. And then there's a couple of comments on my comment on max headroom. So we move on.
So let me demonstrate this. I have 2 different cameras here, and look at the difference between these 2. So, you know, they obviously don't look anything alike. I could look at the one image and make some filter adjustments, camera adjustments to try and, you know, estimate it, and then simply go back and forth between the 2 and see if I can do that. Or I can do like Leo was talking about and split the screen, and now I can directly see the 2 images and see them directly, whether they match or not, as I make adjustments. It's very helpful to do that. It looks a little weird.
You also can see the inherent delay that you get with different cameras, you know, when you're trying to do audio. It's one of the reasons we would always, or I would always recommend, if you can, get all your cameras coming in the same connection. So either use NDI for everything or SDI. But once you start mixing and matching different connections, you're always going to have different latencies. It's just how the world works. And the one thing that people don't realize is you can really overload your USB bus on your machine very fast. Multiple cameras coming on, different USB connectors. We've all looked at them. We've covered them before in here. They can really overload your PC.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever want to see that other camera again, Marty.
I was just looking to see if I could do a vertical wipe. So there you go. It's a little easier to see like this than it was with the diagonal. But okay, enough of that. So you can see how it's easy to bring in other video sources and as many sources as you have need for into a software switcher, because it's virtually unlimited in the number of sources that it can have. To bring in physical sources like a wired camera, you would get something called a capture card as a way to connect, like have an HDMI connector go directly into your computer's motherboard, or an SDI camera, or multiple of those. But the easiest way to do this, well, you could do USB. So the camera that I'm looking at is a USB camera. So that's going directly into this computer. But NDI is another way to do this. So I have my second computer is here on my right, and the audio meter that you see, HMTF meter, is one of the Zoom attendees here. That's running on this computer, and it's on my second screen, and that's NDIing into Zoom that's running on that computer, and that's how you're seeing it. Because it is not on itself a webcam source.
Okay, so we've got a couple of quick questions and a couple of quick comments. The first one came from Deborah. She said it's Castra. Well, it's actually Castra.io, I assume is what she means, that their integrator is recommending. That's actually a piece of software for multi-streaming out that sits beneath OBS or Zoom. So when you set up OBS, it tells you where do you want to stream. You stream it to Castro. That takes the one feed out of your sanctuary and sends it to multiple places. So it's not quite the same. I don't believe they've got a switching. I've never seen one. Kat is asking, is a PC recommended over a Mac for OBS? I have both.
Hang on. Before we move on from that, I just want to point out that if you're going to set up a computer to do multiple streaming, you have to pay particular attention to your bandwidth. Because when we say that you want to have a minimum of 10 megabytes to send out a stream, that's one stream. If you're sending out 2 or 3 streams, you have to multiply that by 2 or 3 times. And so that goes for your internal network, and that goes for your internet service from your ISP as well.
Thank you. Kat is saying, is a PC recommended over a Mac for OBS? I have both, and OBS installed on both, just starting to learn, but we need to determine which is best to acquire once back in the building. So I have experience of running OBS on both. I'd say OBS on a PC is pretty stable. I haven't had much personally, and I'd be glad to hear other people's view of OBS on a Mac. I have other preferences of streaming software on a Mac. I prefer Ecamm, Manycam, Wirecast to OBS on a Mac. Unfortunately, all of those are paid, but they work, and I've been very happy with those. Marty, you're a PC person, aren't you?
I'm a PC person. I have heard of from many Mac users that they have trouble with vMix. They've had some trouble with OBS, although not as many as they have.
They will
vMix.
have a lot of trouble with vMix because vMix does not work on a Mac. Well, I don't class running a Mac as in what's it called, boot, as running on a Mac. Yeah, it's not a Mac software, vMix.
Yeah, you can run Windows emulations on a Mac.
Yeah, but it's
not
Mac
quite
software.
the same. So there could be issues that you wouldn't have on a real PC.
I would say if you're definitely going Mac based, I would look at something that's natively built for Mac, and that is not OBS in my experience. Next quick question from Bill Newhouse in Rockville is USA-A, USB-C, Thunderbolt, any preferences? Well, okay, so going in reverse, it's down to speed. Remember that video is very, very high bandwidth. The more that, like Marty was talking about, the ability to have more bandwidth to go in and out of your sanctuary is exactly the same on your computer. Thunderbolt, even Thunderbolt, older Thunderbolt, is higher bandwidth than anything that a USB has come out. And USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 share the same connector, but they are completely different in terms of performance and throughput. Completely different. That's why most people that we talk to who do a lot of stuff, who want to have a dock, go to something like the CoolDigit Thunderbolt 3 dock, because it allows you to have full bandwidth through the MacBook or your PC when USB-C doesn't.
I want to point out that USB-C is a connector type that can carry or can have on it USB 1, USB 2, or USB 3. Just because it is a C-type connector doesn't mean that it's a fast bandwidth protocol. So you have to really look at the specs of your hardware to see what kind of signal that USB-C connector has on it. It's like, you can have an electrical connector that could have 120 volts, or it can have 240 volts, or it could have 12 volts DC. The connector itself does not define what kind of signal it's on it. That's particularly true for USB-C Less so for USB 2. Generally, USB 2 is an A connector, a B connector, a micro connector, but USB 2 is the signal type, USB 3 is the signal type, and then there are, subsections of USB 3.1, et cetera, et cetera.
So then the last question that we have here at the moment is, or last comment was from John Lecker, Silver Spring. Leo, you say pick a protocol. Do you see the same differences in latency when you bring in NDI HX camera and then into an NDI environment? To explain, they are very different in what they're doing. NDI HX is actually using the older H.264 streaming in a package to send to the device, when NDI is doing a native compression and send. The difference in terms of speed, they have made a big difference to NDI HX on version 4. It's got a lot faster, but you're typically still talking around about, I think, 600 milliseconds. The older version was even slower. NDI, you're down to about 200 to 300. And for your information, SDI is normally about the same speed. So it doesn't sound a lot. You're talking about half a second. But when you're trying to do a lip sync and you're close in on your pastor and you're seeing two different things and it keeps going in and out, it can become confusing to people.
Mothra. Consider. To fill in from an earlier question about trainings in the Discord, technical section number 8, training. There's a post there, OBS Studio Masterclass. It's 5 hours long. It was posted by Rob Gibson from Belleville, Ohio. I put a link to that YouTube in the Zoom chat if you want to grab it.
My apologies to Rob. Okay, well, thank you, Rob, for that. That was a great post and a great find. 5 hours is a bit of an investment, but as you can see, there's a lot going on here. It's pretty deep, and we've only just touched the surface.
We have.
OBS is capable of.
We have, and I think there's two. I have two really key tips that I have on OBS. If you can bring it back on the screen quickly, Marty.
Sure.
The two tips that will save you an enormous amount of time. For me, it won't save me much hair, and for Marty, it's even bigger of a lost cause. If you can go back onto a scene that you've got Marty with multiples. We don't actually have to select it, but okay. The key here is there are two things when you're moving stuff around. It is super easy to end up picking up the wrong thing. So you end up selecting the wrong layer and you start moving that and you regret it. The way to solve that is the padlocks on the right-hand side. You can see there's a set of padlocks and you can lock off things. The minute you lock off a padlock, if Marty locks off the one which is his monitor at the top, I think it must be near the top, you'll see that the movement bar, which was green, has disappeared. If he unlocks it, it'll come back again. So that means that you don't accidentally select something. So once you've got something like, I talked about putting your logo onto onto every single scene. So you've got that, you want that right at the top. But what you don't want to do is halfway through suddenly move your logo and then can't line it up again. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which is a really useful thing of doing it again, is and I don't know if this is if I make a change to this scene, is it going to cause you a problem, Marty?
No.
Okay, so unlock that one. Something that's extra super useful. If you now right click on that source and go down to transform, which I don't know if you can also, we can't see transform.
Let's not use that one because that's what you're seeing. So let me.
Yeah, okay. Use something else. See if you can just go. There's a transform option, and there is a fit to. We can't quite see it. Is it called fit to screen?
Fit to screen, yeah.
Fit to screen. So when you bring in a source, say you bring in two cameras, one of your cameras is running 1080, the next one's 720. So it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. And you're sitting there moving the bars to try and make it fit. Transform, fit to screen. Bang. It's now the full size of the screen. That's it. Done. 2 seconds to do something that will take you forever. And I don't know if you talked about it, Marty. Did you talk about, I may have missed it. Did you talk about holding down the Alt and the Control tab key when
No.
you're doing the edges?
Nope, I have not. Not yet.
Okay. So Marty will show you this.
Hang on a sec. I got to get back to the mode that I was in. Mhm. Okay. I should not be seeing that other thing. Oh, here it is.
If anybody else has got comments or is any things that they want to add about OBS, maybe a good thing is just to raise your hand and we'll come to you on if there's anybody else wanted to make.
I was actually
Any
going to
audio
suggest
comments?
we're
Thank you,
creeping
Mark.
up on the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
And for a show that we always wanted to keep to 90 minutes, we might want to consider closing the show and moving this into, or just at the very least, just opening the microphones and letting people talk.
I just want to cover this really quick. We can explain it without Marty showing it. So the way OBS works, OBS has crop tools. So when you get a screen in, and that's it. Thank you. If you can just see what Marty is doing by holding down, I think it's the Alt key. I can never remember if it's Alt or Control. You'll find it really quickly. You're able to move and resize a window so that little version of Marty in the bottom left-hand corner, actually, if you think about it, is a full size of Marty, but he's cropped to the picture just to show his head. And that's how you do it. So you can move it in and you can crop it by using those things. But as I say, once you start doing this, always remember the transform fit to the screen, because after about 5 minutes of completely destroying the picture, you want to start again and do it properly. So it's being able to use that.
So
Okay.
so Alt, if I hold Alt, I can change the crop size,
Yeah, that's it.
right? If I don't hold anything down, I change the size. If I hold Control down, it's pretty much doing the same thing.
Yeah, there's something, I think if you hold it, I can't, there's one, I'm sure there's another one, but I can't. It's,
Oh, there it
remember.
is. The Shift will change the aspect ratio.
Yeah, of which you've now completely, and anybody knows when they do the shift of something, you're like, I need my picture back, because you can't do it. There is, to my knowledge, there is no undo.
Yeah, I was just undoing it.
There is an undo. There didn't used to be. I'm pretty sure, I'm 90% sure they never used to be an undo.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna shut. Marty, I'm going to hand it back to you so you can shut the stream off.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and all of our panelists and our guests from Georgia. And I hope you found the conversation today enjoyable and informative, enlightening, enriching, and energizing, and motivating. Yeah, it was a really good conversation. And as I said, we just touched into the iceberg that is OBS, and we'll try to get deeper into it. We'll look at some other options. We'll look at some other. We'll look at we can look at VCAM. We can look at ECAM. We can look at a couple of others, and hang on a second while I. No, that's fine. and move on from there. So we got lots of other topics that we can be talking about. We've been batting some ideas around. We can be talking about, let's see, if we go over here and I go to my notes, what are some of the things we've been talking about? We could be talking about music recording. We can talking about having you give us a tour of your sanctuary and your setup. And we could talk about Zoom settings for speech and music. We can talk about computer specifications. We could talk about lots of different things. So if anything that in particular interests you, please let us know by the Discord. So again, many of us are doing this for the very first time. We don't have any models that we can really follow because everybody is different. Everybody has different needs. So, make it your own, figure it out, and we're here to help you. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.